This morning we're going to continue our discussion. The big picture is evidences for faith. Evidence for faith. And we're going to go back to Dead Sea Scrolls stuff. So if you could, somebody, are you doing this, Floyd? Are you advancing the slides? You can't do it from your seat? No carrot cake for you, my friend. What was that on Seinfeld? No soup for you today. No carrot cake for you today. Okay, advance one slide, please. Jars in which some of the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. We're just using that as kind of a cue. We're in a series where we're looking at evidences for faith. And we even did one Sunday morning on how faith and evidence interact, how they complement one another rather than contradict or are in competition with one another. You remember those passages, yeah? And so we looked at passages like Romans 8, that things hoped for, faith is things not seen, and Hebrews 11, faith is the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. And we did a series on that, and we said what these two passages, Romans 8, Hebrews 11, are referring to are the futuristic aspect of faith, things that haven't happened yet, and that's the reason you can't see them. But there are other aspects to faith, like the past aspect of faith and the future and this present aspect of faith. We're living in faith now. Romans 1 says, to those of us who are being saved, right? So we have a current relationship with God. God is doing things in the physical world today, and those are actually seen. We can see when someone gets healed. We can see when God provides a harvest, okay, so that people can eat. We can see people get saved. We can see people be filled with the Holy Spirit. So there's a present aspect of faith. There's certainly a past aspect to faith, right? God created the world. God called Abraham. God delivered the people of Israel from the land of Egypt, right? God split the Red Sea. God gave Canaan to the people of Israel, and they divided it up, conquered the land, then divided it up and settled in the land. Those are things that even the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible is constantly referring back to as being, see how God moved in the past. There are evidences then for God moving in the past. In the book of Acts, we find the same thing in the New Testament. Chapter 1, verse 3 says, after Jesus was resurrected from the dead, he appeared to his disciples. He presented himself alive to his disciples with many convincing proofs. So the future aspect of faith is, yes, it's unseen because it hasn't happened yet. You remember that famous paper that I got from a student some few years ago that said the events that Luke records in Acts 27 and 28 happened before he wrote them down. I didn't share that with you. I don't remember what I wrote in the margin, but what popped into my mind was sheer genius! Exclamation point. So this is what we're doing now, current evidences for faith. That's a part of faith that, heaven hasn't happened yet. Jesus hasn't returned. We're not in our future glorified state. There's still death. There's still sickness. There's still difficulty, struggle, trials, that kind of thing, temptations in our lives. So we haven't reached that final state. But make no mistake about it, there are lots and lots of present and past evidences for faith. So this is a part of that continuum, that discussion that we've been having really since the early part of June, when I got back from my last group that I did in Israel. All right, are we good to advance? Yes, I think that the text that we've been referring to, the complete Dead Sea Scrolls in English by Geza Vermesh, Ververmes, is online at, is it Google Books?
I Googled this, and this is where it referred me to go to. You get the complete book without paying for it.
And what's the website? thechristianidentityforum.net, and you can get the whole book for free without even leaving your seat. How's that for service? You're welcome. To some, I'm saying that for somebody, I didn't put it there. But you can view that, the complete Dead Sea Scrolls. It may be the more I thought about it, it could be an earlier version, because this is like the 15th version. It's the 50th anniversary version of the original publication. So it may be out of date, which is why they can scan it in and put the whole text there. At any rate, enjoy the complete Dead Sea Scrolls in English by Geza Vermesh. Yes, ma'am.
The Scientific Facts book that Ray mentioned is $6.50 on Amazon.
Okay. Scientific Facts in the Bible or about the Bible. Forget. Ray Comfort, C-O-N-M-F-O-R-T, Comfort. Ray Comfort's Scientific Facts in the Bible. I was working with it again last night, Ray. It's a neat little book. $6.50 on Amazon. Prime. Shipping free. Okay. It's Scientific Facts in the Bible. At any rate, that came into the conversation at one point. So here we are with our list. Last time we did Divine Messiah. Do you remember that? And we did a text study, passages from the Dead Sea Scrolls, not the biblical part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but the part of the Dead Sea Scrolls that are that sect's, S-E-C-T''S, that denomination of Judaism's own literature. And we talked about that, the fact that maybe there weren't a majority of people in the land of Israel who had adopted this position or opinion or hope for the future, but there were at least some, several thousand in number, who had adopted this attitude that when the Messiah came, he would be divine, he would be the Son of God. You remember those passages, right? Are these notes already posted on the internet, Floyd? Okay, so this stuff is kind of up there, and you can pull those texts down if you like. We also talked about the Spirit of Truth. We talked about the community discipline. We didn't do big-time studies because some of this is sort of survey, and some of this, on some of these points, we're trying to drill down into specifics. So I know you can sort all of that out. The red ones are the ones that we've chosen to drill down on. We did not get to the use of the language sons of light and sons of darkness, and that's where we pick up our study anew today. So is everybody caught up with where we are and what we've been doing and where we're headed with this? I definitely don't want anybody lost in the forest for the individual trees. All right, so sons of light and sons of darkness. This is interesting language because when you look at other literatures, apocryphal stuff between the testaments, the pseudepigraphical stuff between the testaments, the writings of Josephus, the writings of Philo of Alexandria, the rabbinic literature, which is, if you start piling up hard copy, is, like even higher than this from the floor. The material from the early rabbis, Babylonian Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, the different Midrash collections, Mishnah, Tosefta, etc. You don't hear this kind of language, sons of light and sons of darkness. Where do you hear this? You hear this in Jesus and Paul in the New Testament, and you hear it all over the place in the Dead Sea Scrolls. In this way, we're able to say, Paul and Jesus did not make up this language and began to use it in the early church. They are tapping into a common language pool. This material, even though it doesn't show up, these phrases, sons of light, sons of darkness, even though they don't show up in other literatures from the time period, they show up prominently in the Dead Sea Scrolls to describe people who are right with God and people who are outside the covenant and are not right with God, not obeying God, don't have a positive future with God, etc. And so this is really helpful because it's telling us even things that in our New Testament that sound like, wow, that's Jack in the Box brand new, or that never shows up anywhere else, wouldn't make any sense, because these people, Jesus and Paul, are like, they are master communicators. Their whole thing is to disseminate truth, right? To impact people with truth. So they're not going to talk over people's heads. They're not going to use language that is unfamiliar territory with their audiences, whether this is a live audience like Jesus had, or an audience that Paul is writing to from some other city, some other context, and his letters have to be read. Regardless, they're trying to communicate. And so what the scrolls are saying is, yes, this is language that is in use and that people understand. And that part is helpful. Before you even get into meaning, you're already recognizing these guys are amazing communicators, and they know their world. They know the kind of the idioms, the slang, even the words, the phrases that aren't used much in other literatures. Bam, there we have it. When the scrolls are discovered, we've got it right there. So sons of light and sons of darkness, it shows up in 3 places: Jesus, Paul, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that's pretty much it. Yes, Amy.
I'm just curious. We obviously have a huge amount of literature from this sect, but do we have any non-biblical literature from like the Pharisees or the Sadducees or anybody else?
Yes, we do. With the rabbis. The rabbis are the leadership of the Pharisaic movement. And so, yes, from the floor, more than here. I've got, like, in my library, I've got like 2 whole rows of nothing but rabbinic or Pharisaic material. Now, with respect to the Sadducees, those guys didn't write and leave behind a literature of their own. So we have to patch together from the New Testament, from Josephus, from intertestamental literature, even to some degree the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have to patch together a sort of a bio of the Sadduceic movement.
Sons of darkness, this kind of language used at all in the
by the Sadducees?
Literature?
Within the Pharisaic movement or the rabbis' literature, no. I think maybe one time I've found it. I found one passage, I think in the Babylonian Talmud, where it uses sons of light, but it doesn't pair up sons of light and sons of darkness. There's one or the other and not both. They do, though, show up together in Paul, Jesus, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's evidently maybe this community coined that idiomatic phrase, that slang language. Maybe. I don't think Jesus or Paul did. These guys are too good of communicators. But I think that possibly the Dead Sea community, and they are thousands and thousands in number. It's not like 4 or 5 little, scrawny little hermit guys that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is a movement. This is a denomination within the Judaisms of the land of Israel. And so they coined the term, the phrase, evidently. It gets out into the common language pool, and then writers and speakers in the New Testament, like Jesus and Paul, pull out of that common language pool and they use it and people understand it. That's my big picture point. So no, it's not represented in any of these other literatures. That's what's so interesting, is that now we can not just say, oh yeah, well that's a common phrase within Judaism. In some measure we can even trace it back to its point of origin. Is that not fascinating? That we have enough data preserved for us from the 1st century BC, 1st century AD to be able to do that kind of thing. It's mind-boggling. There are a lot of people in the United States, in the world, who think, well, you know, when we start talking about ancient history, it's just all a big mist, M-I-S-T, kind of like the fog we've had last night and this morning. It's just, it's all one big jump ball. It's a big guessing game. And the reality of it is we've got enough material, culture, and literature left over from the ancient world to really know a whole bunch of stuff. And every digging season produces more stuff. And one of the neat things is, because the pipeline for publishing is so long, for somebody to write and then to submit it to a publisher and for them to edit it and put all the pictures in and finally produce a hard copy, that is a long process. Things are discovered in Israel that don't end up getting into the printed matter stage of information dissemination for decades. And that's one of the reasons why I and others who are interested continue to go back, because there you can actually visit the location. You can talk to the archaeologist. You can know what has been discovered in the same digging season. But what's interesting is that now that we are, praise Al Gore's name, in the information age, then what we can do is we can read reports from Israel Today or Jerusalem Perspective or Middle East Digest or Arutz Sheva or Arutz 7 or any number of outlets on the internet, and we are now hearing about these discoveries in the same digging season in which things are found. Because somebody can go to a site, interview an archaeologist, write an article, post it on the web, bam, it's there the same week that the thing is discovered. Is that not cool? So I am thankful for Al Gore in a pretty sarcastic kind of way, but still blessed to have his wonderful invention, the internet. All right, so sons of light and sons of darkness. Pesher is another word that I would like for you to know. It's the Dead Sea community's name for interpreting the Bible, the way that they interpreted the Bible. In their attitude, for them, the Bible has no relevance except for them. You know, whatever happened before or whatever is prophesied or whatever, everything is relevant to their generation. It's a kind of an egocentric, it's all about us sort of thing. But isn't that fallen human nature? Right? But you even find this kind of Pesher method, like whatever was prophesied, whatever happened or whatever in the ancient times, it only finds its true fulfillment in us. You find that in some measure, that attitude, even in the New Testament. So for example, Peter will say, all the prophets who prophesied from Samuel onward are only prophesying about today. And you get a little bit of this attitude in the rabbis, the Pharisaic, the leaders of the Pharisaic movement, but not to the degree that you get it in the scrolls and in the New Testament. So a method of interpretation, we call it hermeneutics, Bible interpretation, that is very popular in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Habakkuk is writing, right? And he's talking about things that are going on in the Babylonian period. But what the Dead Sea community says, its interpretation is this referred to the wicked priest who chased our teacher of righteousness into the wilderness, right? That kind of attitude where you rip things out of their context and say, this is referring to, this has its fulfillment in our generation, in our movement. You get to some degree that approach to interpreting and applying Bible in the New Testament itself, in the way that they deal with the New Testament. Here's another one. Hosea chapter 11 says, "Out of Egypt did I call my son." Okay, it's really a historical statement. It's not even a prophecy, at least at the Hosea level. But in the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew takes that passage out of Hosea, referring to the Exodus from Egypt, and he says this finds its fulfillment in Jesus and Joseph and Mary coming back from Egypt after Herod, who was trying to seeking Jesus' life after he died. So Herod's dead, and Jesus, Joseph, and Mary come back from Egypt. And Matthew says this was to fulfill the prophecy, quoting Hosea chapter 11, "Out of Egypt have I called my son." Do you see? That is pesher. That's not standard. We don't do that kind of interpretation today. If we did, I'd flunk you. That would be, okay, thank you very much. You kind of like the guy with the Acts 27 and 28. Just now you can go out and you qualify to go out and start your own cult. But that's a popular method exhibited in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that then says when the New Testament writers engage in this, then what that means is that that's common interpretation in Jesus' day. Here's one from Paul. In the book of Galatians, he says, "Now the Bible does not say Abraham's seeds, but Abraham's seed, singular." And that's referring to us, the body of Christ, the community of faith, the people who, like Abraham, placed their trust in God, and it was reckoned to him and to us as righteousness, right? So Paul engages in it, Jesus engages in it, Matthew is doing it, and you might have asked yourself this question before when you were reading along in your Bible: how in the world did they get that out of that? Sometimes, not always, but sometimes your answer is pesher, this unique method or interesting method of Bible interpretation that would not wash today. That is, to look at all previous prophecies and scriptures and stuff as having their ultimate fulfillment only in you, only at this time. So it's in that way that Matthew can look at this Hosea passage and say, this is what Hosea was referring to. Out of Egypt have I called my son. And when you think about it, it's really totally legitimate, because Jesus is that representative of true Israel. So in a way, this is kind of like double fulfillment, if you want. First in the Exodus, and then when Jesus returns to the land of Israel. So I hope that helps in terms of understanding Bible stuff from the Gospels all the way through the letters of Paul and the like. Bob?
If I've got it right, what you're saying is that in understanding scriptural hermeneutics, that this method requires the human ability, along with the context, to understand what the meaning is. Is that what you're saying?
Sharing, it's a biblical thing. So what I'm saying is that this is a method of interpretation that really wouldn't go over too well in hermeneutics classes today, all right? Because what they're doing is they're saying, irrespective of what the original historical context was, what they're saying is this only finds its true fulfillment or relevance in me at this point in time. And what I'm saying is that has become a popular method of interpreting, whether it's legitimate or not. And the New Testament writers, and Paul, Jesus included, they pick up on this and they use it because it is, in their day, a popular method of Bible interpretation. It might not pass muster today, but it was very popular in their day. And so we can't, consequently, as many moderates to the extreme left liberal do, sit in judgment on the Bible and say, well, see, Matthew's just out to lunch there. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's misusing the Bible. No, this is the way Matthew grew up. This is the culture that he's a part of. The people that Matthew is writing to, they know this method of interpretation, and they're able to swing with that. So you use that. You use what tools that you have available to you, and that's what the writers and characters in the New Testament did. That's what I'm saying, Bob, is that we probably wouldn't engage in this, but this is popular in the 1st century BC and 1st century AD, and a lot of it came out of this Qumran or Dead Sea or Essene movement. Ray, you want to? I'm sorry, I got one over here, and then I'll get right back to you. Yes, sir.
Hello, good morning. In the Jewish community, we understand the Pashat, Ramez, Drash, and Saud. These are the layers of knowledge in the scriptures. Is Pesher the same as Pashat, as my understanding?
No, it's not. Pashat means the simple, straightforward meaning.
Right.
And so if you look at Hosea 11, it's like, okay, what he's talking about is Israel coming up out of Egypt in the days of Moses. Pesher, however, would say, well, it might have had its relevance then, but it's relevant right now, and God is doing, out of Egypt have I called my son. He's doing it now in our generation. So it's a little bit different from that that kind of the standard rabbinic. It's not coming out of rabbinic or Pharisaic circles. It appears to be coming out of Essenic circles, Dead Sea circles. Ray.
If I'm understanding you, then couldn't this interpretation be both and rather than either or? Because when I read the Bible, I personalize it to me and how it impacts me in this contemporary time, but it also applies to the past, present, and future for all of mankind.
We're going back to that past, present, and future aspects of faith. And you can talk about double, triple, and quadruple prophetic fulfillment and that kind of thing, and we've always understood that to be the case, is that things like the abomination of desolation in Daniel 9 and other places, that happened in the days of Judah and Antiochus Epiphanes, Judah Maccabee and Antiochus Epiphanes, but Jesus says there's a current application to that, or a futuristic. He says there will be an abomination of desolation. He's not referring to past, he's referring to something that will happen in the future. Yes, that's always been a part of the mix, but these guys, this is the method for them. This is the thing for them. And so my point is that when we see it in the New Testament, we have to recognize that as being, and I think that the moderate to the far extreme left should recognize the Bible is thoroughly woven into the culture in which produced it. And we have to let these people speak and interpret and apply as is popular in their day. We can't, it's a misuse of Scripture to drag that kicking and screaming into our world and then apply our standards and our norms and lord it over, sit in judgment over the Bible that is supposed to be an accurate reflection of who we are, not the other way around. That the Bible reflects supposed to be reflecting us. We're supposed to be reflecting the image of God and His will and what have you as expressed in Scripture. Yes, sir, Tony.
Would this be a form of, let's say, early neo-orthodoxy where you take the meaning to me at this time in my life and then you go back to the historical context, and that could maybe even allegorize it? That would, that's just the reverse of modern hermeneutics. In that first, second century sense, was there a danger that looking back at history, even the old biblical text, there could be significant error in interpretation?
Yes, and the answer is yes, totally. And scholarship has recognized that. They will make statements like the rabbis are practically ahistorical. It's like no one ever lived until their time. They're not real careful about going back and reconstructing historical context and that sort of thing. And so I think that this is where you were going, Tony. You're exactly right. They were in a certain sense, in that respect, being ahistorical, very postmodern before anybody was ever called postmoderns. before there was a movement called postmodernism, where basically you reject, everything is focused on you. But look, this is standard human nature. This is what we do as human beings. It's not an easy fit for us to say, you know what? I and my family and my generation are not the center of the universe. The world does not revolve around us. The focus is somewhere else. We are bit players in this. We love to assert ourselves. It's human nature. We love to be the center of attention. The world revolves around us, and if you ever forget, I'll be quick to remind you. That kind of thing. Okay, Tammy?
Layman's level for me.
Okay, Tammy's going to put this in layman's level
for us.
for
No, I'm asking
us.
you to. I'm not. Okay, so by using the Pesher method, are you saying that Jesus and Paul and Peter were incorrectly referencing Old Testament? Or?
No, I'm saying that they are part and parcel of their culture, and they're meeting people out there who know this right where they are. I don't think that these guys are abusing original context or whatever, but they are saying there's a current relevance. It happened and it got said long ago, but it has a current relevance to us. So there are components of this business of Pesher that are really important. I would say, the Bible is important and relevant to us today. We do this every week when we're in here, right? That's the reason we gather together as a community of faith, to read, to study, to consider spiritual things, revelation of God, and it's not like out of antiquarian interest. You didn't come here to Sunday school to learn to be a museum curator, right? You just curate ancient articles that have no relevance to today. We're just here out of historical curiosity. No, we're here to say, what does the Bible mean, and how does it apply to my life? Okay, so in a certain way, I mean, there are components of this Pesher method that we're engaging in, whether we know it or not. What does it mean? How does it apply to me today? This is kind of where almost every good sermon or every good Sunday school lesson or Bible study should end, is personal, practical, contemporary application. So we're all good Essenes in that respect. We're all good Pesherites. We're all engaged to some degree in that respect, this practical application, kind of where the rubber meets the road in this Pesher thing. So if you didn't know that you've been an Essene all along, and all of a sudden now you're feeling really comfortable in those long flowing white robes, and if you find yourself immersing 2 or 3 times a day, baptizing yourself you might be an Essene. You might be a redneck right? All right. The next thing that we were going to look at is communal living. In the community rule, 1QS and 1QSA, and 4QS and 4QSA, we're dealing with, these are document names. The community rule is what it's called. The initiate is required to surrender all of his earthly possessions to the community. And so this is true. It approaches communism. However, you have the option to opt in or to not join the community. So it wouldn't be a perfect true communism. In the first century church, we have a very similar. It's voluntary. And it's communal type living. They had all things in common, we read in the book of Acts. This is at the end of chapter 2. It shows up again at the end of chapter 4, this communal type living. Now, then it shows up again in chapter 5 that there were certain, at the end of chapter 4, Barnabas sells a property and donates the proceeds to the support of people who are in Jerusalem for the Feast of Pentecost. They get saved, they get filled with the Holy Spirit, they begin to associate themselves with the body of Christ, those followers of Jesus in the first century, and it's not too long before they eventually run out of money. They're away from home, they're away from business, they're away from family. There are no Visa cards, there's no wire transfer, Western Union, you can't go, no ATMs you can sneak up to and get whatever shekels you need to pay for your dinner or whatever. And so these people fall on hard times, and they began to be supported by this communal type living. No one considered his property his own, but they were regularly giving into this fund. And so in chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira, do you remember these guys? They sold a property, but then they lied about the amount that they got for the property, saying they were giving everything into this common fund, and when in reality they had held back a certain amount for themselves. You remember the story, Acts 5. Okay, Acts 6 is another instance of this. You open up in your Bible at the beginning of chapter 6 in Acts, it says, now at this time when the disciples were increasing in number, the body of Christ is growing, then the Hellenistic widows were murmuring against the Hebraic, or the Hellenistic Jews were murmuring against the Hebraic Jews. And this is probably language, Greek-speaking, Greek culture, coming from the Greco-Roman world on pilgrimage to the land of Israel. They get involved in this Jesus movement at Pentecost, and then they end up on financial hard times because they're away from their resources. And it says the Hellenistic Jews were murmuring against the Hebraic Jews, saying that their widows were being neglected, listen to this language, in the daily distribution of funds, right? What's that all about? That's this communal, not communistic, because it's voluntary. It's a communal kind of living where people who have means in the community are helping out people who don't or have run out, okay? So are there any models of this anywhere in Judaism? And the answer is no. Not to this level, not this kind of stuff, except in the Dead Sea community. 1QS, 1QSA, 4QS, 4QSA. The community rule is laying down the rules for community living. And it is communal, or if you want to call it communistic, but you have the option of opting in or staying out. So what I'm saying is these unusual pictures, these are word videos in Acts 2, Acts 4, Acts 5, Acts 6. This is not without precedent or antecedent. There are movements going on in Israel like this one, like the Dead Sea community. It's not an anomaly. It's not something weird. It's not Jack in the Box new. It's not something that no one had ever heard of. No, these people, these Essenes, are revered. They are highly respected in this community, the community of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. They are held up as not exactly role models. Doesn't everybody want to grow up to be Essenes? But they're held up as being paradigms of godliness and righteousness in this community. And so it's not surprising if they are already, and for hundreds of years before the Christian community is constituted in the book of Acts, these guys are living this way. So it's not something weird, bizarre, and, oh, well, this is, a precursor to Leninism and Stalinism and Maoism, like we've seen in our world, in our generation. This is voluntary. This is about community. It's about faith. It's about how do we live in this world when there are the haves and the now have-nots that are both in the same community. And it's a beautiful, amazing picture of how God's people functioned, at least at the beginning. But it's not some weird, bizarre appendage that, oh, well, that just came out of nowhere. That sure did blindside me. No idea that this would ever come up, and yet here it is in chapter 2, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6 in the book of 4 chapters in the book of Acts. You've got this kind of language of this communal living, and what I'm saying is you've got this already embedded in the culture, this template, and the early church is simply opting into that at its very earliest stages due to persecution, due to famine, which caused economic problems in that part of the country, and due to this unusual influx of new members into the kingdom who are from places that are so far away they can't access their financial means. Does this make sense? Okay, Carter, you got somebody. Judy.
I was wondering, is this where the Amish get their teaching about living in the communal, helping their own people?
I suppose so, yes. Yeah, in very close-knit faith communities like the Amish, yes. I think that there are parallels there. Interestingly, in the New Testament, notice, though, that this model of what was going on in the early church is not transmitted. It's not exported anywhere else. You don't hear about it at Antioch with Paul and Barnabas and the like in Acts 13. You don't hear about it in Paul's missionary journeys. You don't hear about it in Paul's letters back to those churches that were founded during his missionary journeys. And so here's what's fascinating. Paul will even say, when we were with you, we used to give this order that if someone doesn't work, then he shouldn't eat. Each is responsible for his own family. He says, one who does not, in his letters to Timothy, he says, one who does not provide for his own family is worse than a pagan, which is just all absolutely fascinating. So Paul has migrated away from this position, but notice that there's a reason for it. If he's out in the Greco-Roman world, those people are in churches, local churches, where they live, where they have family, and where they work, okay? It was an unusual situation that you had so many people coming from the diaspora to Jerusalem for the Feast of Pentecost. It's one of the three major required festivals of Judaism, and it was at that flashpoint that you have circumstances like the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus at Passover, and then at the next Pentecost, you have the outpouring of the Holy Spirit with these pilgrims from all over the world, and they come to faith because Christians are being faithful to give lifestyle witness and verbal witness to the events accomplished among them, and people are coming to faith. They're being integrated into the local body and are being discipled before eventually returning home. Here's a fascinating just sidelight of this. How does the good news reach Rome? In the book of Acts, Luke is completely silent. Peter's not there yet. Paul's not there yet. In fact, when Paul in his letters, he says, I've wanted to come to you many times, but I've been prevented. Circumstances have come up. But then when Paul eventually does get to Rome for his trial in Acts 27, guess what? He's greeted by brethren, and he goes up to the church, right? And so the body of Christ is already there. How did it get there? Where were the missionaries or the apostles or whoever? The record is completely silent. Even Eusebius's ecclesiastical history doesn't give this, Paul went there or Peter went there, silent. People coming back from the land of Israel are the ones that just regular common people. I think this is beautiful. Just average everyday folks who have taken time out to make a special trip to Jerusalem, meet the Master personally, be filled with his Spirit, be discipled by his disciples, by the apostles, and then returning back to their places of origin. Some of these in Acts chapter 2 says that there were Jews and proselytes or converts to Judaism from Rome, and they'd return back. So the greatest church, the one that the bishopric that was eventually elevated to the point where it's the Pope, that church was started by lay people just going home penniless. So cool. Or shekelless, whatever.
Hey, I think that's one of the most fascinating things, the untold story of the way the gospel got to Rome. And I have been absolutely intrigued by it. And I believe that around crucifixion, that something around crucifixion really shook a lot of travelers who would be going back home. And the one, and I've said this before, so forgive me, but it's the one thing that just keeps me buzzed. I honestly believe that given the dynamics of the resurrection within a Roman military context, that you had the number of cohorts, I don't know exactly how many, but there were certainly a number of people who were witness to and were in direct contact with people who had a direct experience at the resurrection of Christ that would have been totally freaky. And I have always been fascinated at the prospect that at the very core of that Roman church, I almost can just guess, I wouldn't bet, but I would guess that you have some Roman soldiers who came and brought testimony to add a bulwark to those who were coming back from that time in Israel. Right. And you cannot believe it, what kind of strong, I mean, talk about an alloy of faith. When you have, I can't imagine how this would come to Rome with any success. Because think about all the different religions that tried out in Rome. I mean, there were a lot of ancient religions.
Plenty of competition on every street corner.
So what made this different? This was huge.
Yes.
Something happened.
Let me just continue to add to this stream of thought. If you are from the city of Rome and you're Jewish, or you're by birth, or you're Jewish by conversion, meaning you're a proselyte, and you have come to the land of Israel in obedience to, like Deuteronomy 16:16, your males shall appear 3 times before the Lord, and Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles, okay? And you go to Jerusalem in obedience to that, and you get caught up in this messianic movement. You're going to go home. You're going to go back to Rome. This is the seat of imperial power. This is the seat of senatorial power. This is where the rule of the province is generated. And you go back into the lion's mouth with a message, yes, I believe in and I serve a master who you crucified. See, you're following a convicted criminal, right? And not only that, but you're following one who claimed to be and who is called by his followers king. And you're going into a Roman context, it's almost like, okay, let me paint the target on my own back, right? Yeah, let me single myself out for persecution, for hard times, because that message, it is folly to the Gentiles. This idea of a resurrected Savior, when everything in the Greco-Roman world taught that when you died, that's when you were freed from this physical prison. And yet you're saying this guy came back to life and he's promising us that kind of resurrection life. The message is wrong. The title is wrong. The leader is wrong. Everything is wrong about this, and you are going back as one of them. When you read the Roman historians of the time, Cornelius Tacitus or Tacitus and Suetonius, his contemporary, these guys speak so disparagingly of Christianity. They call it a demonically inspired superstition. That's the way that they refer to your faith. They say that this Christianity, this religion that was founded by Christus, that it started in Judea, but it ended up in Rome, where all things horrible and shameful find a place. Yeah. So that's Roman attitude toward Christianity. I mean, it went over pretty well when in 64 A.D., Nero himself set fire to his own capital city so that he could then engage in urban renewal. About a whole quarter of the city of Rome was destroyed. Guess who he blamed it on? The Christianoi. The Cristiano. Do you know what this is? O-I. You just put I-N-S on it. The Christians. And it's this official persecution. And we hear about this only from Roman historians, that Nero would crucify them, and he would wrap them in animal skins and set them on fire as torches in his garden. You've heard this from the pulpit before. I'm telling you that it is official written Roman record. You got somebody, Carter? Yeah.
Well, I don't think you're going to be able to handle them all, but I'll start in order.
Okay, we've got 10 minutes, and I'll try to be short in my answers.
Going back to communal living, how about a kibbutz in Israel?
Okay, there's no direct connection with the Essenes or with the early Christian movement, but it's people living in community. The kibbutzim are, it's voluntary, but once you go in, this is modern Israel. That's actually from before statehood all the way up till today. There's a movement called the Kibbutz Movement. The root kavatz means to gather together. K-B or V-T-Z. Kavatz means to gather together, to join together. There's another movement called the Moshav movement, M-O-S-H-A-V. It comes from the root yashav, Y-A-S-H-A-V, that means to settle. And it's much less communalistic, much less communistic, but these are people still living in community with one another for mutual support and protection. And sometimes cooperation in terms of production of agricultural materials or plastics or whatever. So yes, we do have a couple of movements in modern Israel that are like this. Commune movements in the 1970s, late 60s and 70s in the United States. Some of those are still going on. Some of them are even Christian. Jesus People USA in Chicago, for example. Next. Hey, Joe.
I'm thinking about the communal living, and you can comment on what I have to say. I've always thought of that, even though it's mentioned in 3 or 4 chapters there in the Bible, in Acts, it's kind of almost a one-time thing, and the subsequent references are always back to the same people within a general period of time.
Exactly.
And also, I think that the communal living, when we read the word there, tells us really more about those who are the givers, the providers, who in their generosity and in their grace and in their love, they're willing to share.
Right.
Which is a beautiful Christian trait.
It's completely, the motivation is completely different than what you get in our expressions of communism today. You're exactly right. And that's the reason why I was kind of quick to point out that once you get out of that early stage in Jerusalem, after Act 6, it doesn't show up again. And instead, you get this attitude that people should be working, they should be engaged in, like Paul says, let the thief steal no longer, but let him work with his hands so that he has enough for himself and to bless others as well. So the whole emphasis is on outflow in Christianity, not inflow. And Paul's churches, he teaches that very thing. If you don't work, then you shouldn't eat. And if you don't provide for your family, then you're worse than a pagan. That approach to communal living that was, I don't want to even say it was an experiment. It was an exigency. It was a necessity in early Christianity in Jerusalem, under famine conditions, under persecution, and in this unique situation where you have a ton of people from outside the land of Israel who have come together for the Feast of Pentecost that then experience salvation and infilling. Next, Rob.
Yeah, looking back at that Ananias and Sapphira story, a lot of people will look at it and say, "Well, look, the church started off coercing people out of their money," but Peter is quick to clarify when Ananias is in trouble. That field was yours and the money was yours, and you could have done what you want. Why would you bother to lie? So his kind of incredulity at the what was the point kind of shows how it was really. Not mandatory, and he could have given half and said, "Hey, here's half," and they would have been fine.
Right. Have you guys ever connected Acts 5 with the story of Aiken or Achan in the book of Joshua? It's a beginning stage, and it is one of those, you didn't have to do this. You could have left that stuff alone instead of stealing from God and burying it in your tent. So if you want to follow that up, please feel free to do that. Yes. Larry. Yes, sir.
Actually, I think that this was a precursor movement done by God for the purpose of preparing the way for the Christ, just as John the Baptist was. And this communal movement that was done by the Christians served a purpose beyond daily maintenance, beyond the appearance or the pattern of holiness that the Essenes did. It was preparing them to shed their attachments to the things in Jerusalem, because they were going to be driven from the town, and they were going to be driven from the town just before it was going to be destroyed.
Right. Yeah. Which is, again, a similar track that the early Christian community in Jerusalem wrote. You were talking about the Essenes. There is definitely the parallel between the Essenes and the temple leaders' rejection of them, their leadership, and their movement, and chasing them basically out of town, and what eventually, right before the temple's destruction, and the similar thing happened to the early Christians. They also abandoned Jerusalem. According to Eusebius of Caesarea, they ended up in Pella, in modern-day Jordan, Transjordan, other side of the Jordan River, and the leadership rejected them and their message as well. Yeah, Steve. Think you get the last word. Did we get through them all, Carter, or not? Wow.
I'll be short then. I just wanted to add, as you were talking about the impact of the resurrection and the story of Jesus getting to Rome, Acts chapter 2, when they were baptized in the Holy Spirit, began to speak in other tongues, Spirit empowerment. Luke notes in verse 8 that of those who heard them speaking in tongues, just before he gives his sermon explaining what you talked about, there were, quote, visitors from Rome.
Right. Yeah, that was I was trying to make that point. Visitors from Rome, both Jews and, doesn't it all say proselytes? Okay. And so these guys will eventually find their way back to their hometown. They do have families, wives, businesses, children, right? Their responsibilities, connections. And these guys would found that church, take the kingdom, good news, Jesus-based message back to Rome. And the Church of Rome is the result that Paul experiences when he gets there in the book of Acts at the end. All right, so we're down about through half of this list. I just kind of threw some of the most obvious connections between New Testament and Dead Sea community together. We are going to do a longer study like we did earlier with the divine Messiah in pre-Christian Judaism, and that will be the beginning point for next week. I want to look at some ancient text, Dead Sea text, rabbinic text, apocryphal pseudepigraphical text, and talk about the fact that there are alternative or alternate calendars being observed in the land of Israel by the Jewish community there at the time of Jesus, and how that impacts our understanding of our own New Testament. It's going to be interesting. I don't think that you're going to want to miss this. This is not the kind of Sunday school class. I know I've lived off the menu and off the beaten path my whole life, I think, and continue in that. So this is not the common fodder of a Sunday school class, but I think you deserve to see it. I don't think you deserve to hear me paraphrase or summarize what these texts say. I want you to see them and put eyes on them yourself, so that you have the opportunity, you have that experience of original discovery and the opportunity to take this ancient stuff that has been preserved and then apply that to our understanding of Jesus and the Gospels, the Passion Week. So maybe, Floyd, are we able to post those? Is this going to be posted before next week? I'm just wondering. It will be posted? Okay, so those texts from, for example, the Mishnah. This is Pharisaic literature, rabbinic literature, from the Dead Sea Scrolls, from some pseudepigraphical documents called First Enoch and the Book of Jubilees. This will be stuff that you've never seen before, but that's okay. Every time we pick up a newspaper, we're reading something we haven't seen before. It's why we're reading it, right? But then we'll have a wonderful opportunity to apply that to our understanding of the Last Supper. So this is not something that is peripheral, something that's fringe, some total non-issue that I just baked up because I needed something to talk to you guys about. This is there in the literature, and I want you to enjoy it. So if you like, feel free to front load this, what we're going to do next week, and read those texts online at centralfaithbuilders.com, or just come next Sunday and we'll start off at square one, because that's what we're going to do anyway. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for meeting with us again, for directing our thoughts and words. Thank you for moving us in a direction where we are seeing more and more that the life of godliness, biblical Christianity, the documents of the New Testament, the events and realities in the history of the early church are not some bizarre appendage, not some weird growth caused by radioactivity or just something so unusual and bizarre that no one could comprehend them. But that, Lord, you're meeting people in the first century as much as you are right now in the 21st century, right where we are. You're using language we can understand. You're giving us evidences for faith to grow us and strengthen us and deepen our roots and empower and enable us to share these things with other people. We thank you for people like Tim Mahoney. We thank you for the scribes of antiquity who preserved so much of this material, written material that has come down to us today. Lord, we ask that you would use all of that stuff. Bless Tim and his work. We bless the memory of those who were faithful to write and to copy by hand over the centuries to preserve this written stuff for us. Lord, we ask that you would just bless us as we go forward in your name, representing you. Empower us by your Spirit to be your examples this coming week. We look forward to what you're going to do in future Sunday school classes, that the kinds of growth that's going to take place in people's lives because we are encountering the realities of the Bible and of what has been preserved in archaeology and ancient literature and the like. We ask for your blessing on those endeavors as well. In Jesus' awesome name, amen.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our videos. If you're benefiting from the content that you're receiving from them, please make sure that you're following us on Facebook and that you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you never miss a thing. While you're at it, share our content with your friends and family. Encourage them to follow us as well. Thanks for helping us to reach as many as we can with a powerful message of God's Word in its original context.